The air outside the ranch hung heavy, like a storm that hadn't yet broken. Malachi Brooks stood on the porch, his hand brushing the leather of his gun belt as his eyes tracked the riders before him. They hadn't come with badges, hadn't come with warrants, and he knew in his bones that they hadn't come for justice. These were men who dealt in shadows, who made a living off threats and violence. The false sheriff, Marcus, let his words drip like poison, weaving lies about a murdered judge, a witness, and a woman in white. Elena pressed herself close against Malachi's side, her voice breaking in a whisper only he could hear. He's lying. Harrison Blackwood was never a judge. And I didn't kill him. I escaped. The truth in her tone struck him harder than the pistol he expected Marcus to draw. Escape, not murder, not betrayal. She was running from something deeper, something far older than the blood that now stained her past. Before Malachi could question her, the moment snapped tight like a drawn bowstring. Marcus stepped forward, his hand grazing the butt of his revolver, and Malachi's world narrowed into lines and angles, calculating death before it could fall. But then came the fourth rider, a silhouette cresting the hill, black coat draped over broad shoulders, moving with the deliberate calm of a predator that never rushed its kill. The false sheriff's grin faltered, even his men shifted uneasily. Malachi didn't need a name, the weight of this man's presence was enough. But Elena gave it breath with her gasp, sharp and broken. Cain, her father. Cain dismounted with a grace that betrayed a lifetime of violence. His hair was touched with silver, his pale eyes colder than winter stone. Even Marcus, swaggering and sure just a heartbeat ago, straightened like a boy caught misbehaving in front of a schoolmaster. "Marcus," Cain said, his voice steady as steel. "I thought I made myself clear about handling this quietly." Elena shrank against Malachi's arm as those pale eyes settled on her. "Hello, daughter." The word cut her in two. Malachi felt her whole body go rigid, as if she'd been struck. The air between them thickened with unspoken history. And in that moment, Malachi understood. This wasn't a hunt for justice. This was family, poisoned from the root. Elena's voice came, trembling but defiant. "I stopped being your daughter the day you sold me to Harrison Blackwood like livestock." Cain's expression never changed. His face was a mask, but behind his eyes flickered calculation. You had responsibilities, debts to pay. Running only made it worse. Important people lost money. Malachi's stomach churned as Elena's fury spilled out. "He was old enough to be my grandfather. He hurt me. And when I fought back, you chose his money over your own blood." That was the truth. Malachi saw it as clear as the setting sun bleeding across the hills. Whatever blood had spilled in Blackwood's study, Elena had been a victim long before she'd been a fugitive. Mrs. Crane's voice cut through the tension, her shotgun leveled steady. "Get off this land!" For a long moment, silence held the yard. Cain studied Malachi, his words sharp as a blade. "Surely you can see harboring her puts you in an impossible position. She belongs to me." Malachi surprised even himself when he answered, steady and sure. "The only thing I see is a father dragging his daughter back to men who mean her harm, and I see threats on my land. She's under my protection now. You're not welcome here." Cain's smile was cold, jagged. "Very well, but she will come home. They always do." As he turned to leave, his final words were a dagger to Elena's chest. "Your sister sends her regards. Sarah's taking your place. She won't resist like you." Elena's cry broke the night. Her knees buckled, her sobs tearing through the ranch yard as Cain and his men vanished into the horizon. Malachi caught her before she hit the dirt, but already his mind was racing. This wasn't just a runaway bride or a grieving widow. This was a storm reaching from the highest men in the territory down to the dust beneath his boots. And he had just chosen his side. The hours after Cain's departure bled into one another. The house felt smaller with the weight of Elena's sobs echoing against its walls. She sat on the porch steps, wedding dress torn, eyes hollow, as if every breath cost her more than she could give. Malachi knelt beside her. "Tell me," he said softly. And she did. The story spilled like poison from an old wound. Cain was no rancher, no honest trader. He dealt in debts and bodies, calling himself a businessman when he was little more than a flesh merchant. Men owed him coin. He offered them alternatives nights with his daughters, marriages to settle scores, contracts sealed with blood and shame. Elena and her sister Sarah were his most valuable assets, not because of love, but because their blood made refusal difficult. "I thought he'd spare her," Elena whispered, her voice raw. "Sarah's only 17. When I ran, I thought he'd leave her alone. I was wrong." Malachi clenched his fists until the leather creaked. He had seen cruelty before, but this was rot disguised as law. By morning, word had spread through town. Men eyed him differently at the general store, whispers curling like smoke. Sheriff Yates, too comfortable in Cain's shadow, warned Malachi that harboring Elena was a mistake. Merchants refused his coin. Even old allies hesitated. Cain hadn't just brought fear, he'd brought influence. That night, Malachi found himself at the edge of his fields, staring at the line of trees, wondering how long before Cain made his move. Elena came to him quietly, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "You should let me go," she said. "If I stay, they'll burn this ranch to the ground. They'll kill you." But Malachi only shook his head. "If they're coming, then let them come. This land has weathered worse than men like Cain." He didn't say the rest. That her presence had already rooted itself in him, that he'd seen the fire behind her broken voice, and he couldn't hand her back to the man who had betrayed her. It was Mrs. Crane who spoke the truth as they sat by the dying fire. Cain isn't just after her. He's after power. Men like him only understand one thing when someone stands in their way. You've chosen to stand, Malachi, so you'd best be ready. Malachi knew she was right. By sheltering Elena, he hadn't just chosen her side, he'd painted a target on his own back. And Cain was a man who never missed his mark. The final night was thick with silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Malachi moved through his barn, checking rifles, counting rounds, knowing it might not be enough. Elena sat nearby, her hands clasped tight, lips moving in prayers he couldn't hear. The first torchlight appeared before dawn. Cain's riders came, 30 strong, their silhouettes jagged against the dark sky. Malachi stood at the barn doors, rifle in hand, Mrs. Crane at his side, Elena behind them. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to fire, steel, and the cold certainty of death. But then another sound, a drumbeat, deep and steady, rising from the tree line. Figures emerged, hundreds of them, their faces painted, their bodies moving as one. Warriors. 300 strong, Elena gasped. "My mother's people," she whispered. They came. Cain's riders hesitated, their torches flickering. Cain himself rode forward, his pale eyes narrowing. "So this is what you've done," he said. "You've stirred ghosts." Malachi didn't answer. He didn't have to. The warriors lined themselves in front of the barn, a living wall of defiance. Spears, bows, rifles, generations of survival forged into steel and will. Cain sneered, but for the first time, Malachi saw uncertainty in him. "This isn't over," Cain spat. "No tribe, no man, no land can keep her from me." But his words fell hollow, for when the sun rose, it rose upon a sight Cain had never imagined: 300 tribes standing shoulder to shoulder, defending the land of a rancher who had chosen compassion over fear. Elena wept, but this time, the tears were not from despair. And Malachi, standing at the barn doors, knew the truth. Sometimes, a man doesn't choose his battles. Sometimes, the battle chooses him. This is the story of a rancher who chose to protect the innocent, and of a woman who defied her father's chains. It is a story of power, betrayal, and the courage to stand when the world demands surrender. If their fight gripped you, if the image of 300 tribes rising at dawn stirred something deep within you, then don't let the story end here. Share it. Let others feel the weight of Malachi's stand and the strength of Elena's survival. Subscribe for more tales of sacrifice, courage, and the untold legends of the frontier. Because in the end, These stories are not just about the past, they remind us who we are when the darkness comes.